Good
Okay.
afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you for having me here. After listening to the first and second presentation and also the conversation among all of you, I know that you all are very expert professor in the education, and I'm here very junior to all of you, and I'm a very early in my early career research path here. So I'm very keen to get feedbacks on my research and also my presentation here. Okay, today my topic is about the peer review and also the self-assessment skill of accounting undergraduates. Okay, this campus is based on Curtin University, Malaysia, particularly in an accounting unit. Okay, and we are going to examine from the perspective of reviewers and also reviewees. The reviewers and reviewees are both the student reviewers and reviewees. So the introduction here is, okay, as the literature shows that the peer review improves the quality of student final submissions. Okay, however, majority of the peer review, they tend to only focus on the impact of peer review on reviewee rather than on the reviewers. And then also to that, a few study only a few studies to date, they investigated the benefits gained by the peer reviewers. And none of the past study, they have focused on accounting units. Most of the past study, they focus on like the English writing and the science and other subjects. Very rare, they focus on accounting unit. And for your information, last year is the first time that accounting unit incorporated peer review in our assessment. So that is my intention to see whether this peer review is really having an impact on the student revision outcome. And besides, based on the literature review, none of the study that investigated the student in the developing country, particularly Malaysia. Most of them study in the context of developed country like US, Japan, Taiwan, all this. And then most of the past study, they employed the explanatory study, the thematic analysis, the content analysis, or quasi-experiments. Okay, then the aim and contribution of my study here is trying to fill the gap by examining the impact of peer review on accounting undergraduates, both reviewees and reviewers who are studying in Malaysia. And different from the past study, we use a quantitative data analysis model, which is called partial least square structural equation modeling. In short, is PLS-SEM, to examine the plausible relationship between the student attitude towards the usefulness of peer review and the development of the self-assessment skill. And another one is to examine the development of the self-assessment skill and the revision outcome. Because based on the past study, most of the studies say peer review could improve the student final submission outcome. But this study, I wanted to see the peer review actually that helps to develop the peer review, the self-assessment skill, which in turn that leads to the revision outcome. So I'm not directly examining the impact of peer review on the revision outcome. Instead, I'm looking at the development of self-assessment skill in this process. So this leads to the development of hypothesis here. Okay, the student attitude towards the usefulness of online peer review is associated with the development of the self-assessment skill. Okay, so this one also apply on the student reviewee. And the third and fourth is related to examine the association between the self-assessment skill and also the revision outcome of the student reviewers and reviewees respectively. So that's me, we will run the model twice, one for the reviewer, one for the reviewee, and see which one is much more significant or on which parties of the student. Okay, so this one is the methodology and the main findings. Okay, we have two data analysis here. One is the qualitative data analysis, which is the thematic analysis. We designed two sets of questionnaire for reviewers and reviewees. The questions are different. For example, we were asked, we have the question for the reviewee, like, do you think the feedback given by your peer is fair? Why? And do you think it is easy to use the feedback from your peer to revise your work or not? And then do you think this peer review activity is beneficial and useful to be included in your other accounting unit as well? And what is the most recent thing that you have learned? So we have this open-ended question structured to collect the qualitative data based on the reviewees and reviewers' points of view. And then we also have the questionnaire to collect the student attitude towards the usefulness of peer review. For example, the question to the reviewee, like, I believe that it is important for me to learn how to take the feedback. Taking feedback is effective approach to improve my critical thinking skill. So we have all these questionnaire design, two set of questionnaire design for the reviewers and reviewees. But because I received an instruction that my slide can only limit to five slides here, so I didn't put my questions here. But if you want, I can share it later on after my conclusion section. And this one is for the thematic analysis. For the partially square here, we will use the PRS SEM to predict and investigate the models, which is these three variables, by computing the path analysis to estimate the causal relationship between all these variables. Therefore, I verified the hypothesis that I showed you in the previous slide, the 4 hypotheses. And the samples here, like I mentioned just now at the beginning, the sample are my students in my unit, which is the second year accounting undergraduate who are taking the financial reporting unit. This is the only accounting unit in this university which implement the peer review activity. So that is my intention to see whether this is really effective and appreciated by the student or not. And the main finding here based on the thematic analysis, most of the student is positive. They show a positive attitude towards the usefulness of the peer review activity from both the student reviewers and reviewees' point of view. But some, they also commented that, like reviewee, they say 90% of the respondents, they think that the feedbacks given by the friends are not professional. They think that the feedback provided by the friends are irrelevant, so they don't appreciate the comments given by their friends. And some even say that there's a tendency of plagiarism because in their assignment, some sort of section may require their own interpretation. They think that the idea are copied by their friend. There's a tendency of plagiarism. Whereas from the perspective of reviewer, 39% have the emotional concern. What is emotional concern? Because in a question, we ask the reviewer whether you are reluctant to give the negative feedback or not. So some say they are reluctant to give the negative feedback because this peer review activity is not done anonymously. That means they know who are the reviewer, who is giving the comment on their work. So they don't want to hurt their friends' feeling. They think that the feedback given may be demotivated. So they tend to just give the positive feedback instead of giving the constructive negative feedback. And some 2% think that this is a meaningless initiative, which means that they don't really appreciate this peer review activity. But overall, most of the students, they are having a positive attitude toward the usefulness of the peer review activity. And then based on the data analysis here, the partially square, the SEM partially square here, the hypothesis, the first one is not supported. The first one I show you, the first one is that we propose that the student reviewer attitude towards the, this one is, there's a shift here. This one is reviewee. Reviewee, the attitude of student reviewee towards the usefulness of the peer reviewer, towards the peer review activity is not associated with the self-assessment skill. However, we found a significant positive relationship between the student reviewer's attitude toward the self-assessment skill development, which means the self-assessment skill development is more profound from the perspective of the reviewers. And then this structural equation modeling also shows that both the self-assessment skill of the reviewees and reviewer, they have a significant impact on the revision outcome. So only this hypothesis is not supported. So I come to my conclusion here. Okay, based on the researcher-based knowledge, which is me and my co-investigator, this is the first study which employed the PRS-SEM to examine the plausible relationship between the educational variables related to peer review activity. And this method you insight into different statistical relationship between the student attitude toward the usefulness of the peer review and the development of the self-assessment skill. So specifically, there is a significant positive association between the two among the student reviewers, but not among the reviewees. So despite this, the self-assessment skill is reported to have a statistically significant influence on the revision outcome for both reviewers and reviewees. And we want to emphasize is that the process enables the student to become a better reviewer of their own work and help them to revise and improve their work. So in essence, the peer review promotes the development of the self-assessment skill. And then based on the open-ended question, the student commented that both the reviewers and reviewees, they value, they appreciate the benefit acquired from the peer review process, and they urge for the implementation of this peer review activity in other accounting units so that they can present their financial report, the financial statement in a more attractive, in a more professional manner. Yeah. So this one, if it is allowed, I can just go through the questions here. So this is the questions given to the reviewee. Like, do you think the feedback given by your peer is fair? Why? Do you think it's easy to use the feedback from your peer? So these are the patterns and the extracted code from the questionnaire. Like, what is the most recent thing you have learned from the peer review activity? Like, learn from the mistake, help each other, appreciate the feedback, all these things. And then from the reviewer perspective here, we ask them, do you think you gave fair feedback without bias? Why? And do you feel reluctant to give the negative feedback, all these things? So these are the open-ended questions to the student reviewers and reviewees. And for the PRS-SEM, we have the construct here for each of the variables. So under each of the construct here, we have a few questions, few items to measure it. And then these are the measurement models used in the PRS-SEM. Yeah.
Oh, so thank you, Jong, for that. Yeah. A very in-depth look at your work. So have people got any comments, suggestions, questions?
I have a question, Jong.
Yes.
When applying this sort of peer review amongst students, how is the quality controlled so that if you're my peer and you're reviewing my work, how do I know that what you're telling me is actually correct as well?
Because we have a peer review form for the student to fill. So in the form, there was specifically mentioned part 1, okay, you list out the 3 strengths, 3 weaknesses, and provide 3 recommendations for this section. Then for another section, they will also have another section for another section, like provide 3 weaknesses, 3 strengths, and also provide 3 recommendations for this particular section. So the student knows the comments is specifically for this part. And we will also have, we as the instructor will also have a look at the peer review form. And after all, we will provide an overall feedback to the student.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the students are trained in giving that peer review. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sorry, I've got a question. Jong, is it a formative sort of feedback or is it a summative? Are they actually, you know, adding to the grade?
This one is formative.
I also have a question about students' enjoyment while they were doing it and or resistances, you know, so did they enjoy it while they were doing it or did they only enjoy it after they did it when they started to see they were getting something out of it? And what resistances did you encounter along the way?
Resistance, because this is one of the requirements that the student have. This is one of the compulsory activity implemented in the assignment. So the students, they have no choice. They must provide the peer review comments on their friends' draft. So I don't know whether they are resistant to this or not. And because we are all conducting this online, so maybe when we resume to the campus, this activity will be carried out in the class. So from there, I can see their reactions, see their response spontaneously. But as for now, this is all through the online mode.
Okay, thank you, Jong. Does anyone else have some questions for Jong?
Just, I just had a thought there, just with that last comment, that do you think it'll change the nature of feedback? Do you think students will be more reluctant to give bad feedback when they know the students, they're more familiar with the students because they're meeting them in class?
Yes, this is also our question too. We are thinking whether they are reluctant to say the negative feedback or not if they are sitting like you and me sitting in the classroom like that. Yeah, this is also one of the challenge to the student and see how we can facilitate this activity.
Is the feedback anonymous or?
It's not anonymous. They know who is their reviewer, so they know. So that's why there is a concern raised by the student that they, like my writing here, they say, do you feel reluctant to give negative feedback? So you can see that 39% of the respondents, they are reluctant. Yeah, because they think that negative feedback is hurt. And they will embarrass their friends because they know each other.
And that was part of my comment about resistances, you know, how they feel about that, and how did that work if everybody knew who was doing their review.
Yeah, we will see if this one can be changed to anonymous if this kind of challenges persist or not.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jong. Any other final questions for any of our presenters? We've finished a little ahead of time, so if you have any other questions for any of the presenters, feel free to ask.
It was all very interesting and very, very different units and subjects that we're each teaching and each looking at. So it was quite very interesting.
Yes, congratulations to all the presenters.